I'm so excited to preach this word today. Are you excited for the word of God at both of our campuses? I know at Eastchester you're excited. They're excited here at Jamestown. So on Palm Sunday, Jesus has a week to live. A week. That's 7 days, 168 hours to live. 10,080 minutes. And we know more about this last week, the 7-day period of Jesus' life, than we know about any other 7-day period throughout the story of Jesus. So if we want to zoom in with a microscope on the atomic Jesus, this is the week to do it. Because if you want to know who somebody really is, check them out while they're stressed. Right? This is the most stressful week of Jesus' life. If I want to know who you are, I can just observe you while you're stressed. If you want to know what your habits are, watch what you do when you're stressed. So what are your habits when you're stressed? For me, I fiddle with my watch band like this. You know, I just click it. I used to watch videos of myself preaching, and I was constantly doing this while I was preaching. And I'm like, what is wrong with this guy? Why can't he? And I really had to train myself to stop, because when I was preaching, I guess, you all stressed me out or something. I don't know. You know? What do you do what are your habits when you're stressed? Do you scream? Do you fight? Do you pray? Do you worship? What do you do when you're stressed? In the last week of Jesus' life, with 10,080 minutes left to live, on the first day of the week, Jesus chooses worship. You can't miss this. On Palm Sunday, the first thing Jesus does in his last week on this planet is to engage in the habit of worship. The title of the message today is called The Worship Habit. And I want to talk to you today about how when the walls are closing in on you, when the valley seems dark, maybe instead of being stressed, maybe instead of screaming, you could choose worship. What would it mean if you build a worship habit in your life? How could it change things? And this is the thing I know about habits. Habits are best built when you're on the mountain, not when you're in the valley. Because when you're in the valley, you've got what you've got. And so what I'd like to say to you is that if you're feeling good this morning, if you're feeling nice this morning, maybe this is the morning where you begin to develop on the mountain the worship habit. I want to talk to you about this idea that Jesus was a worshiper. So I've got 3 quick message points, 3 ideas for you today, and then I'm going to get off this stage and we're going to go back to worshiping like we should be on Palm Sunday. So real quickly, 3 ideas. Everybody say number 1. Number 1, first idea is that God made the moment. God made this moment, Palm Sunday. When you heard the scripture read earlier, you heard it read that this was a moment prophesied by the prophet Zechariah 500 years earlier in the Old Testament. So in the Old Testament, there is this book creatively called Zechariah, and Zechariah the prophet predicts Palm Sunday. This is a moment 500 years in the making. Has it ever occurred to you that God ordains worship moments? That God crafts worship moments? Jesus was constantly seeking out worship moments. Jesus had a habit of worship. It's not just on Palm Sunday. Jesus is constantly in the Bible seen worshiping in the synagogue on their Sabbath. As a matter of fact, some of Jesus' greatest miracles happened while Jesus was worshiping in the synagogue. Miracles unfold on worship. In the middle of their worship, Jesus does some of his most magnificent work. Jesus is constantly seen worshiping during their religious festivals. As a matter of fact, the woman caught in the act of adultery is brought to Jesus while he's worshiping in one of these religious festivals. And Jesus gives her grace and mercy, because a true worship atmosphere, listen to me, will be an atmosphere of grace and mercy. Where people are really worshiping God and not just worshiping religion, there will be grace and mercy given. Jesus is constantly, and we'll talk about this in a few weeks in this series, but I'll give you a sneak preview. Jesus is constantly getting by himself with God to worship, to just commune with God constantly. When Jesus is in the wilderness being tempted by the devil, one of the things Jesus claps back at the devil with is Jesus looks at the devil and Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan, for it is written that I will worship the Lord my God and serve only him." He's always talking about worship. Jesus meets the Samaritan woman at the well, right? Jesus is separated from this woman by racial division. And Jesus starts talking to this racially divided woman about worship. Because listen to me, in a worship environment, racial divisions come crashing to the ground. In a worship environment, we realize we're all just people trying to worship the same God. And Jesus says to this woman, he says that God is looking. Everybody say he's looking. God is looking for people, anybody who will what? Worship him in spirit and in truth. Jesus was constantly looking for worship moments. Has it occurred to you that this is a worship moment that God has made, that God has prepared? Has it occurred to you that God made this moment? Or this week when you were coming home and you had a hard day and you're blasting Maverick City on your radio speakers, you know, and you're breaking it down in your car, and you look up and your hands are in the air, not on the steering wheel where they should be. You know who you are, right? You crazy worshipers. Do I have some crazy worshipers at our campuses here? You know, that moment in that car was a moment made by God for you. And I wonder how often you miss the moment. I wonder if the disciples who were going to untie these donkeys, I wonder if they almost missed the moment. You know, because this is crazy when you think about it. Jesus tells them, just go to a complete stranger and ask for his donkeys. You know, this is crazy. On their way, they're probably thinking, well, you know, Jesus is going to eventually get us arrested, right? If they only knew, right? They are probably thinking, it's just another day following Jesus. Oh, well. I wonder if they almost missed what I think is the greatest moment of citywide worship in all of history. Because it's just another day. Maybe you're sitting here and you're here in body, but you're not here in spirit. And you're in danger of missing a moment. Everybody else is smiling and engaging around you, but you just don't get it. I don't get why they're so happy. And maybe you're in danger of missing this moment. Or maybe God has told you, you need to start getting up early every morning and praying. And you tried it a couple of times, but you just couldn't get out of bed because you were up late watching reels on your phone. And well, God understands, and maybe God does or not, I don't know. But you're missing a moment. Missing a moment where God fashioned it and made it for you. I was thinking about how kids live in the moment. You know? Like they are in the moment. I only need to say 4 words to you and you'll know what I mean. Are we there yet? Our children live in the moment. We don't live in the moment. No, we're thinking about a moment that is, 20 days from now. Am I going to be able to afford my bills? Or am I going to be able to afford to pay my employees? Or what's going to happen when I see this person again and we've got some friction? We don't live in this moment. We live in that moment. But our kids live in the moment. didn't Jesus say that unless you become as a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven? And I wonder if the reason we don't feel so connected to God is we're living in that moment instead of this moment. Are we there yet? Like any parent will tell you that there is this moment where your children are on the verge of driving you bat crazy, right? Are we there yet? No, guys, we'll be there in 10 minutes. 30 seconds later, are we there yet? No, guys, we'll be there in 9 minutes and 30 seconds. Are we there yet? 30 seconds later. And our children are so excited about the possibility of what's about to happen that they can't keep their mouth closed. I wish we could get that excited about God. That you can't keep your mouth closed, that you can't keep your hands down, that you can't keep your voice silent because, oh my gosh, there's a moment that God's about to move. I wish we could have some Are We There Christians at Renaissance. Are we there yet Christians at Renaissance Church? People who are on the edge of their seat. These are the people who encounter the presence of God. The ones who are on the edge of their seats. The ones who are ready to raise their hands at the drop of a hat. The ones who are ready to shout out to God, Hosanna, in just the slightest hint that God may be moving. Look at your neighbor and tell your neighbor, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet, God? Are we there yet, God? You know, when me and Kelly, I'm ashamed to mention this, but when me and Kelly, our kids were younger, there were some times where I remember one time in particular, it was a family walk, and they kept asking, is it time to go on the family walk yet? Is it time to go on the family walk yet? And finally, me and Kelly just looked at each other and said, let's just go on the stupid family walk right now. Let's get it over with, right? Let's just have the moment now. You're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you can develop an are we there yet mentality with God, that God will accelerate what is already scheduled in your life. Do you want to get there faster? Do you want to get there faster? Then develop an are we there yet mentality. Are we there yet people who come to this church? I don't know, they do things like show up for prayer on Monday nights. And Wednesday nights they show up for prayer. Are we there yet Christians? They show up to church on Sundays early. It got real quiet here in Jamestown. I'm not sure what it's like there in Eastchester. And they get as close to the action as they can when they get here. Like, you know, you get when you go to see your favorite singer in concert. You don't sit in the back if you can help it. If you can help it, you're going to get right as close as you can. I remember about 5 years ago when New Kids on the Block came into the Triad area here, and I saw a bunch of 45-year-old women acting like they were 12 all over again. Why? Because the big act is in town. Can I tell you that every time the people of God gather, the big act is in town? God is present and we ought to act like it. Develop an are we there yet mindset with God. Your first message point is that God made the moment. Everybody say number two. Number two is that Jesus sat on it. God made the moment, but Jesus sat on it. Sat on what? Well, he sat on the donkeys. But before he sits on the donkeys, the disciples and the people take their clothes off and make a seat for Jesus. They're putting clothes on top of the donkey because they want this worship moment, watch this, to be comfortable for Jesus. Do you ever wonder if the reason that certain people have so much God in their lives and certain churches have so much God in their lives is because they've made it comfortable for Jesus to sit down? Well, I didn't like worship much today. The drums were too loud. I didn't like the songs. The worship just wasn't for me today. Guess what? You're right. The worship's not for you. It's for him. We don't sing what we sing here for you. I gotta say something. We're not here to make you comfortable. We're here to make God comfortable. That's why we gather. That's why we sing. That's why we share his word. It's so that God can be made comfortable. In the Bible, Jesus said, I will inhabit the praises of my people. Inhabit, that means I will live in the praises. Or it also means I will sit down on the praises of my people. I wonder, does your worship make God, does your life worship, I'm not even talking about what you do on Sunday mornings, does your life worship make God comfortable? Is the throne at the center of your life comfortable for Jesus? Or have you allowed other things to also sit down on the throne? You're making Jesus' throne uncomfortable. By the way, Jesus will not share the throne of your life with anything. If there is anything you placed in the throne beside of Jesus, Jesus stood up a long time ago. We've got to make things comfortable for him. So what habits are sitting down in the throne of your life? What are your habits? Last week we began this idea, this big picture idea for this series, and the idea is this: habit establishes atmosphere. Right? Everybody say that with me. Say, habit establishes atmosphere. And so good habits establish atmosphere, and bad habits establish atmosphere. In the Palm Sunday story, Jesus sits down and an atmosphere of worship erupts over a whole city. What habits are you allowing in your life that are killing the worship atmosphere of your life? What things are sitting down that need to be moved? When we have our moment of worship our God-ordained moment of worship at the end of this time today, I think probably at least half of us, maybe all of us, need to do some repenting about the things that we've been allowing to sit down in the seat of Jesus in our lives. What are the things that need to be evicted from the throne of your life? I got news for you. I got real good news for you. Because Jesus said, I inhabit the praises of my people. You are one praise away. You are one crazy praise away. You are one hand raise away. You are one lifting your voice in worship away from Jesus coming back to the throne of your life, moving out the stuff that you've allowed to sit there and sitting down in your life where Jesus belongs. You're just one praise away. One praise away. In this moment that's coming, you can give Jesus his chair back. Your first message point was that God made the moment. The second message point was that Jesus sat down on it. Number three, everybody say number three. Number three, Jesus said, untie them. Untie them. Untie what? Untie the donkeys. This had to be uncomfortable, didn't it? For the disciples. This person they don't even know, they're going to take his donkeys. I want you to imagine I send one of you out and I say, hey, I want you to drive out around and the first Hummer you see. All right, let's upgrade a little bit. The first Porsche you see. Let's raise our level of expectation, shall we? The first Porsche you see. I want you to knock on the driver's side window and tell them, hey, we need this car at Renaissance Church. No. You don't need to worry. You don't need to worry about background checks. Just trust me. Just trust me. Here, you take my Honda. We'll take your Porsche, and we'll have it back. We'll exchange back tonight. We'll see you again. I promise. This was uncomfortable, right? Yeah. It's because worship is uncomfortable. It is. This is why the Bible calls worship a sacrifice of praise. If you're doing worship right, it's uncomfortable. Let me talk to my more mature Christians in the room right now. So folks just beginning your walk, just tune me out for about 30 seconds, okay? But to the mature Christians in the room, I think a problem that many of us have is that we have become comfortable with a repeated worship that was at one time uncomfortable, but it no longer is. Real worship, if done right, will always stretch you. Well, Pastor, I worship God with my money. I tithe. I give. I understand, and thank you for doing that. Don't stop doing that. But you've tasted and seen that God is good. If you're tithing, I'm telling you, God is blessing you. I don't even have to know you to know that God is blessing you. And tithing is no longer a stretch for you. Now tithing is a joy for you. You actually want to do it. Oh, well, Pastor, I lift my hands on Sunday mornings. I worship. And look, lifting your hands on Sunday morning, if that's what God's leading you to do, that's uncomfortable at first. But now I've seen some of you. You've gotten to the place where you can lift your hands in the middle of a Harris Teeter. You don't care. You know? And that doesn't stretch you anymore. Are you saying that I'm not worshiping when I'm stretching my hands up? No. It's just that some of the meanest religious snakes I ever met raised their hands and spoke in tongues on Sunday morning. You know? And the truth is that for a lot of us, we're raising our hands and speaking in tongues based on memorized repetition rather than current relationship. God says, I want to stretch you now. I want you to worship me with your all now. I want a sacrifice of praise now. Stop trying to burn yesterday's sacrifice. That ember is long gone and extinguished. I need something new from you. I need new worship from you. Oh, well, Pastor, I'm never going to do that. What's your that? I will never do that. What is it? Get in your head. I have found that quite often the thing you say you will never do is the very sacrifice of worship God is requiring of you. There's a reason you're so resistant to it. It's because your flesh is resistant to it. When I was, let's everybody stand. I want to tell this story. I'll have our bands come forward. When I was a little boy, we loved watching basketball. Like the month of March was a whole holiday season in our house growing up. Anybody know what I'm talking about? You know, even at school, like it seems that schools stopped in the month of March so that you could watch some really important stuff on TV called the ACC and NCAA tournaments. And every once in a while, you would see these idiots on TV with their shirts off, with letters on their chest. And I said, I will never do that. Never, ever will I be on national TV with my shirt off and a letter painted on my chest. Ever. Everybody say ever. Ever. So this is the story of the time I took my shirt off on national television and had a letter painted on my chest. It's my sophomore year at Wake Forest University. Wake Forest is playing Carolina. It is a big game. I don't know who to cheer for because I love both teams. But I'm sitting in the student section, and I'll never forget, a cameraman comes up to me, and he says, hey, kid, you're skinny. We need somebody to take their shirt off and let us paint a W on their chest. Are you in? And I said, absolutely I'm in. And that's the story of how your pastor appeared on national television with his shirt off and a letter painted on his chest. I had the feeling, though, that if a cameraman from ESPN can convince me to do what I said I would never do, I have the feeling that the presence of God, it properly invited into your life, can penetrate your never, melt your heart, and cause your spirit to engage in a moment of worship that your flesh says you will never do. I have the feeling that if you let God move, you'll find yourself doing things that you can't believe you were doing. Me? How did that happen? It's because there's freedom in the Spirit. When we let the Spirit in, there's freedom. Those disciples are going to untie some donkeys, but they don't realize that Jesus is actually untying them. It was their act of obedience, it was them being loosed up, that allowed a whole city to be loosed up, a whole city in worship. And this got me wondering, if you get untied, can your household also be untied? If you get untied, everybody say me, because I'm talking to you, the Spirit's talking to you. If you get untied, maybe God can untie your daughter. Oh, I feel that. If you get untied, maybe God can untie your place of work. If you get untied, maybe God can untie Renaissance Church. If you get untied, maybe the whole triad will get untied. And so your worship isn't just about you. It's about them. Because if you get untied, they can get untied. I want to invite you all to praise our great God right now. Loose yourself, be untied, and let's worship our God together.